Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. My name is Clayton Fletcher, and I am in peaceful, harmonious, super safe New York City, happy to be bringing you yet another edition of the world's longest running poker strategy podcast. Last week we had a fine episode and we talked about some hands from episodes past, and I don't like to have a GTO Wizard solver review when I have a guest, or in the case of my recent trip to Colorado, two guests at the same time. I just think that it's better to save that for when you and I are alone together and we can really get deep into solver land, which we are definitely going to do in just a minute here on this episode. But first I want to tell you about some shows I'm doing in Tucson, Arizona, March 14th and 15th. I am headlining at a place called Marana Laughs. And what's special about this place is all the comedians are clean. That means you will not hear any F-bombs or similar language. Not that if you come to one of my shows, you're likely to hear that sort of thing anyway, but it is fun to go to a clean, sort of family-friendly comedy show where the language is appropriate for all ages. So if you want to come see me in Tucson, Arizona, there's a link in the description of this podcast where you can buy tickets to this or any of my upcoming stand-up comedy performances. All right, let's get into it, guys. I want to go over some hands that we discussed on last week's episode, and this time we're going to use my favorite solver, GTO Wizard, where they recently did a comprehensive update of their already super powerful software, and at the heart of this new release is Analyzer 2.0, a revamped interface, advanced statistics, and a major upgrade to the GTO Wizard AI engine, so it now delivers even sharper and more consistent solutions for maximum precision. And guys, that's so important. If you're interested in taking a trip to Solverland yourself, I've got a great deal for you. Click the affiliate link in the description of this podcast episode, guys, and you can get 24 hours access to all of GTO Wizard's features. And then when your trial period is up, you can save 10% on your first purchase because you clicked the link in the description. Okay, last week we went through a hand that I had actually live streamed on twitch.tv/ClaytonComic. It was a pre-flop spot that caused some controversy in the chat on my Twitch channel. A $33 PKO with 15,000 guaranteed in the prize pool. I was not doing particularly well. We had 57,000 in our stack when the blinds were 1,600 and 3,200 with a 400 ante. So we only had an M of 7, or as you may prefer, 17 big blinds. Early on in the tournament, I hadn't been doing well. I opened from the button to 2 big blinds with the King of Hearts, 10 of Spades. The small blind folded, and now the big blind, a Russian player that I'm familiar with, who is extremely aggressive, 38-31, with an 18% 3-bet percentage over 150 plus hands, shoves, and then I decided to make the call because my opponent was so loose. So let's look at my decisions one at a time with GTO Wizard. And guys, I think some of you, if not all of you, will be very surprised at some of the output here. So I min-raised on the button. Action folds to me on the button. I min-raised to 2 big blinds. Let's look at that decision first, because actually I felt like that was a no-brainer. Like, we have 17 bigs, they fold to me on the button, we just open King 10, right? Well, not necessarily. The mix is actually 40% of the time the solver just open shoves. 17 bigs. My M, remember, is 7, which means my stack is 7 times the pot. So we are shoving 57,000 to win 8,000. Now you talk about an overbet. That's an overbet. I don't think I really ever open shove 17 big blinds. It just seems like such a big stack. But that's exactly how the solver plays king 10 off 40% of the time in this spot. The next preferred play in the mix is actually just calling. So we're open limping on the button 38% of the time, almost as often as we shove. And then the other 22% is my play, the min raise. Now I want to talk about the full ranges for making these plays so we can see how king 10 fits into the mix. As mentioned, the solver just wants to open rip it for 17 big blinds, laying 57,000 to win 8,000. So let's look at the other hands that would also play this way. We talked about king 10 doing it 40% of the time. Pocket fives all the way down to pocket deuces does this 100% of the time. Ace 10 off all the way down to ace 4 off 100% of the time. So if you're dealt ace 5 on the button and you have 17 big blinds in a tournament, you shove. I mean, I'd never play that way, and so this was very eye-opening for me. Other hands that shove at least part of the time include ace trey suited, ace 4 suited, king queen offsuit, king 9 suited, 10-8 suited some of the time, and jack 9 and queen 9 suited some of the time. So have you ever in your life been playing in a PKO and had the action folded to you on the button and you have 17 big blinds, an M of 7, and you're sitting there on the button with jack 9 suited or 10-8 suited and you just stuck it in? I just have never done that. It seems like such a big bet, but these are plays that are a big part of the mix pre-flop. Now remember guys, a GTO strategy is one that is designed to be unexploitable even by the best player in the world. Against other opponents, you may have a better strategy, but this is the strategy if your opponent makes 0 mistakes ever. All right, so the next move on the list is that open limp. Remember, 38% of the time we're supposed to open limp with king 10. Other hands that are open limping on the button here are queen trey suited, 10-6 suited, jack 4 suited, pocket aces, pocket kings, at least some of the time, guys, 10-8 off, ace queen suited, and 7-5 suited. Now, these are not all the hands that want to open limp, but you can see that this range is somewhat polarized, right? We've got the nuts, aces, and kings, all the way down to jack 4 suited. So if you do open limp on the button with king 10, for example, you should also be limping at least some of the time, guys, with aces and kings as well, so that your opponents can't exploit you by saying, well, he's open limping with 17 big blinds. He must not have that much of a hand. All right, let's look real quickly at the hands that go for the min raise, like I did. So king 10 is in that mix, but only 22% of the time. Hands that do it more often include king 8 off, jack 6 suited, pocket sixes, pocket aces, 10-9 off, and ace 9 suited. So you can see how range construction is kind of complicated. I wouldn't expect you guys to memorize this range, but it's more about extrapolating the lessons that the solver is trying to teach us. Sometimes we need to have a polarized range. Sometimes we need to have a linear range. But at the end of the day, playing 17 big blinds when it's folded to you on the button is probably not as easy as you thought it was, especially when you have a medium strength hand like king 10. All right, let's look at my next decision. So I did open raise to 2 big blinds, and then after the small blind folded, the big blind rips it in, as I fully expected him to, and I made the call. So I've put in 2 big blinds with my king 10, and now I'm calling off 15 more big blinds versus a big blind shove. Remember some of the other hands that min raise: king 8 off, jack 6 suited, pocket aces, pocket sixes, 10-9 off, etc. So of all the hands that min raise, this is the full range that is supposed to call off versus an expert opponent. Pocket aces, obviously, all the way down to pocket sixes, plus king 10 suited, king jack suited, and any ace X that's in our open raising range. which includes ace-king down to ace-jack, plus many, many different suited ace combos, including ace-4 and ace-8 suited, as well as king-queen offsuit. So we don't call with king-jack offsuit or king-10 offsuit, as I did, but we do call with king-10 suited and king-jack suited versus a perfect GTO opponent. But my question is, does my knowledge of this Russian opponent, remember he's 38-31, does that knowledge justify my widening up my range as much as I did, and including king-10 off into the range that calls after I open for 2 big blinds? What do you guys think? You can get at me on Twitter at Clayton Comic. You can also find me on the TPE Discord, and there's a link to that Discord in the description. You can join for free and contribute to all of our different conversations about poker strategy and the weekly TPE free roll, which is happening once again, by the way, this coming Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We're giving away $1,000 in the TPE free roll, which will be live streamed by Derek Killingbird Tenbush, twitch.tv/Killingbird. All right, I want to hear what you guys think about that one. This hand, I now feel empowered especially when I have like a tough Russian opponent in the big blind, and I just know he's gonna 3-bet shove so much. When I have this kind of hand, it's empowering to know that I can just open rip it, and that takes the play away from him, doesn't it? He can't really just call off with a very wide range. As it turns out, I did lose that pot as the opponent held ace-jack, and I did not improve. All right, let's look at another hand, another pre-flop spot. I re-entered this $33 PKO, and this time I did much better. At 2,500 and 5,000 with a 600 ante, I had 282,000, which is right around average, so about 55 big blinds. The action, it was one fold to me. I'm in second position, or as you may call it, UTG +1, and I made it 10K, just a min raise, with the ace of hearts, deuce of hearts, so ace, deuce suited from early position, and then the next player folded, and the player in fourth position 3-bet to 31,000, and the action folded back to me, hero, with the ace of hearts, deuce of hearts. Now, I did have some number of hands, a bit of a read on this player. He was tight, 15-11 with 5% 3-bet. And I remember thinking that I made an exploitable fold in this spot. I did not want to call the 3-bet from out of position, especially when that 3-bet came from relatively early position as well, and from a player that I knew to be very tight. So all of those factors had me folding, but also questioning what the wizard would have to say. Well, guys, I'm very happy to let you know the solver says, yay, Clayton, this is actually a 100% pure fold. We are never supposed to call or otherwise continue with this hand in this spot. It's a pure fold, so good for me, even though I wasn't very sure at the time that I did the right thing. Every once in a while, I slip and trip and fall and happen to land in a bed of roses. But let's talk about my opponent's 3-betting range with about 60 big blinds. So when you are facing an early position open and you're in fourth position yourself, the 3-betting range, at least some of the time, is pairs from aces all the way down to sixes. Now, some of them are doing it 100% of the time, like the aces, and then some of them are doing it much less frequently. We also do this with ace-king, all the way down to ace-10 off, at least some of the time. Ace-9 suited down to ace-4 suited, and then king-jack suited down to king-9 suited, at least some of the time. And just a little bit, I guess what you could call your bluffs, the queen-9 suited, jack-9 suited, and 10-8 suited, that were also part of that opening range we discussed in the other hand from last week. So because this range is so tight, we are actually supposed to always fold the ace-deuce suited against it. But what is the range that should continue? Let's look at 4-betting first. We know we should be 4-betting to say 85,000 in this spot with a hand like pocket aces, pocket kings, all the way down to pocket tens at least part of the time, ace king and ace queen offsuit, and we should bluff 4-bet occasionally with a hand like ace 8 suited, king 10 suited, king jack suited, and even king 9 suited. Now those hands don't really want any action, which is why they are what we call the bluffing range for 4-betting in this situation, but they're not totally hopeless hands either, right? You could flop something with jack 9 suited, for example, and then your opponent would be surprised that you actually had that hand as a 4-bet. Oh, not jack 9, I meant to say king 9 suited. We call this 3-bet quite a bit with ace 4 suited and ace 5 suited, plus ace queen offsuit and no other offsuit non-paired hands. The solver really hates to play from out of position with offsuit hands as a rule. So that's something for us all to try to keep in mind. We also call the 3-bet quite a bit with pairs from 9s all the way down to deuces, and we call very often with king queen suited all the way down to king 6 suited. Now I don't even know if I'm really opening king 6 suited very often from second position, but it is in the official GTO pre-flop chart at 60 big blinds. But we've talked on this podcast many times about how when I personally construct my range, I prefer to add a few more hands from late position and then subtract like the king 6 suiteds of the world from my early position range, simply because I find those hands very difficult to play from out of position. And the problem with raising early is that you will mostly end up out of position post-flop. We also want to call quite a bit with suited hands like queen jack suited all the way down to 8-7 suited. So these medium suited connectors are really good hands to include in our pre-flop calling range facing a 3-bet at 60 big blinds or so. So I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. Again, not really expecting everyone to, memorize this exact range at every single stack depth, whether you have 17 big blinds or 60 big blinds. But if you fool around with GTO Wizard enough and you practice the drills and you look at the range construction tool and the Analyzer 2.0, you can really start to get a sense of maybe where some of your pre-flop leaks are. And I believe that just fixing some of them, finding those leaks and plugging those holes in your game before the flop can help you avoid very difficult decisions post-flop. For example, in this spot last week, I wasn't sure whether I should be folding ace deuce suited facing this early position 3-bet after I had opened from second. So I wasn't sure what to do. But now that I've done this homework, it would take really compelling evidence to convince me to do anything but fold the next time I'm in this spot. Maybe if the 3-better is a very bad, very loose, very wild player, perhaps I have a specific read on him, like he twitches his nose when he c-bets and he doesn't have it or something like that, then that could justify me getting involved. But really, I think that sharpening your pre-flop ranges and making sure that you play really solid, fundamental pre-flop poker is a great place to start if you're really looking to get serious about this game. One more note about this pre-flop decision. We do occasionally shove. So we open to 2 big blinds. This guy raised to 6 big blinds. We occasionally stick in all 60 big blinds, only about 4.5% of the time. But when we do, we have no bluffs at all. We only ever do this with ace king off sometimes, pocket queens sometimes, and pocket jacks sometimes. But really, if you never shoved 60 big blinds facing a 3-bet pre-flop, I don't think that would actually affect your bottom line much at all. All right, let's do some new hands. I want to talk about last year's World Series of Poker main event. We're moving on to day 2. I'm getting excited for the schedule to come out. I know it's going to come out in the next week or two, and I'm very excited to see what they have in store for us this summer. not only at the Horseshoe, but also at the Wynn, the MGM Grand, and even that shiny new poker room up on the second floor of the Palazzo. All right, so this is from the 501,000 level. It's 501K with a 1K ante. And in this hand, the action folds to the hijack, which is Aileron Pilo. He makes it 3,000, so 3 times the big blind. And he's got the ace of spades, ace of diamonds. I have no problem with him making it 3x. It's early on in the tournament. Everyone's super deep. He's got 91,000. Another player at the table has 200,000, which is 200 big blinds. And the deeper you're playing, the larger your pre-flop raises can be. My only question is, would Mr. Pirro have also made it 3,000 with other hands that were not the nuts in his range from the hijack? That's the question I don't know the answer to. Next to act in the cutoff is Mark Davis. He's got 113,000 in his stack and a hand that I will not reveal just yet, but he makes the call. Everyone else folds, and it's going to be Pilo versus Davis in an 8,500 pot. The flop comes king of diamonds, 10 of spades, tray of spades. So king 10 tray with 2 spades hero with the ace of spades, ace of diamonds. What should Pilo do here? Well, I mean, we have learned from our solver work in the past that the GTO strategy dictates a lot of checking when the caller is in position. That doesn't mean we never bet, but it might make sense here to check and hope that Davis caught a piece of this flop. Maybe he makes a little bet. We can check raise it and then be happy when another spade comes off, giving us an overpair with the flush draw. Or we can just bluff catch if we don't particularly like the next card. We can check it again and hope that our opponent checks it back. That's one way to control the size of the pot from out of position, to the extent that we can do that. But let's be honest, there'll be a lot of times when we won't really love this flop, like when we have ace-5 suited and not spades, or maybe a hand like pocket nines, and other hands in our pre-flop raising range that whiffed. We're going to want to check those hands, so we need to check strong hands some of the time, and I think this might be a good spot to check and possibly call, or maybe raise, depending on the sizing. Instead, Aileron Pilo decides to bet 7,000 into the 8,500 pot. This is a very large bet sizing for this board. But Davis makes the call, and now we've got 22,500. This pot is getting substantial, and the turn is the queen of clubs. So our board is now king of diamonds, 10 of spades, tray of spades, queen of clubs. This is not a card that Pilo should be happy to see. A lot of 2-pair hands got there. A couple of straights came in. I don't know. I think this is a good card for him to check. Maybe, I mean, we do have a gut shot straight draw along with our overpair. Perhaps we can get some value by checking. Maybe opponent would bet a hand like Queen Jack or something. But yeah, I think this pot is getting a little too big for one pair. So I would check and hope that my opponent didn't bet too much on this card. But Aileron Pilo decides to put in 18.8 thousand. Again, a very large sizing, almost a pot size bet again on the turn after almost a pot size bet on the flop. This just feels like, what can we really get action from? I guess we're targeting a hand like King Jack, right? Top pair and a straight draw. Might be able to call a bet of this size. But imagine the pain Mr. Pilo must feel when Davis raises enough to put him all in. And would you ever want to call in this spot? Like, we've got an overpair, which is almost certainly no good, but we also have that gut shot straight draw. But it's the main event, and you started this hand with 91 big blinds. I don't know if it's good poker to go broke with one pair in a single raised pot when you start with 91 big blinds. And I think this hand really illustrates the danger of making your sizing too large. There's no reason why we should have a decision right now for all of our chips with an overpair / gut shot and pocket aces here. But Pilo does eventually come to the right decision. He lost more chips, I think, than I would have in this pot. But sure enough, Mark Davis held the nuts, ace, jack, and he had his man drawing dead to a chop. Now, I don't really mind Davis's play here. You want to try to get your opponent to go all in with you when he's got a very big hand, something like pocket kings, pocket tens, maybe ace, queen of spades, which has a pair and a flush draw and a straight draw and everything else going on. So, in a way, Davis is unfortunate that Pilo only has aces here, and so his overbet shove doesn't work on 4th Street. And that'll do it for this episode. Guys, please take a minute to subscribe and rate and review the podcast, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else. It really does help us to gain visibility as we continue to climb the ranks in the ever-growing field of poker podcasting. And for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas plays. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Luck and intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, a hard pair we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me.